Because later on, they admit to locking her social media.
Right, and taking access away from her to her social media accounts.
Correct. So going back to the timeline here, this is dropped. So that post is dropped on the 27th, right? And then on January 11th, right, we have the January 11th, due to unforeseen reasons, we'd like to announce Selen Tatsuki will not be able to participate in Anime Impulse. So canceling that right there, right? Where Selen starts to trend, RPR posts about concern, right? On January 30th. January 5th, all of her videos are privated and her Twitter X account is set to be protected. And then they tweet the termination notice, right? So, right. Which is this, and we'll pop this up real quick because this is something that's been kind of, to me, the fact this is one of the first legal fuck ups. Why would you post this publicly? This as a practice, you never fucking do this, right? It's a horrible practice. To publicly post a termination notice is inviting a legal nightmare. As corporate counsel, people know me from doing representing special districts as well. I did that when I was younger as a younger attorney in Florida, representing Reedy Creek, which is why I covered the Disney issues. But later on, I was corporate counsel for a very large corporation. We would never post a notice of contract termination publicly. This is insane, right? This goes to her lawyer. This goes to her, right? That's about it.
Well, here's the kicker. It didn't even go to her. She did not find out that she was terminated until a friend of hers messaged her and said, hey, what's going on? I just got this thing about you getting terminated. And it just, imagine finding out that you got fired from somebody messaging you.
Yeah, this is in it. You know what that is? That's the case I just covered, Gina Carano, right? And that's why I love covering these different cases, because you'll see that similar thing where people think it's okay. Disney thought it was okay to terminate Gina Carano via essentially tweet, which is the same thing that she found out here. They literally tweeted this out. By the way, I love that this already got hit with a community note.
Yeah, that was the beautiful part of it, was every single one of the Nijisanji posts were getting community noted in real time.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So to go through this, and I'm not going to read it line per line, guys. I just want to go through some of the things I see in this that are more problematic.
That was highly unusual. But, this is kind of a culture gap too, posting the public notices, because
yes,
since VTubers are more of a social thing,
yes.
It goes back to idol culture in Japan.
Idol culture,
they
yes.
always want to keep people informed on the status of their idol, how she's doing. Mm-hmm. And so they're much more open regarding their activities. I mean, they're very secretive as far as what they're actually doing. But in terms of if they're going to hold a big event, or they're taking time off, they're usually very public about that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I understand that from idol culture. I was in Korea as well. Idol culture is extreme there as well. You want to be very clear. You want to make good representations. Otherwise, that can lead to some crazy scenarios, right? Where people get very, very mad and do extreme things. So
we just had an anime kind of that vein.
Oh, really? Which one?
It was the one that just came out.
Oh, okay.
And by the way,
Shinoko. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you. I can count on my weebs to come through. Okay, we terminated Selen, and I am going to summarize, due to breaches of essentially their rules, right, of their policies, and that would amount to breach of contract. Now, that is something I'm generally familiar, because breach of contract is fairly international. Right, the rules regarding a lot of other different types of law, criminal law, even certain types of civil law are different. But breach of contract is actually one of the things that's pretty international. And just so you guys know, because one of the big issues is venue. With breach of contract, typically you look at where the defendants headquarters is, where their place of business is, and also if it's stipulated in the contract or stipulated anywhere else or wherever the work is primarily taking place, which clearly would be Japan. So for the breach of contract claim, the venue would definitely be Japan, in my mind. If I'm doing a comparative law analysis, if I'm having to judge where does this go to Canada, where Doki Bird Selen lives, or does this go to Japan? It goes to Japan. So the appropriate analysis for breach of contract is Japan, but that does not preclude Selen/Doki Bird from bringing other claims in Canada that are not available in Japan. So Gator, does that make sense to you? Does that analysis make sense to you?
Right, because it's a Japanese company and the contract is ostensibly a contract with a Japanese company. The proper venue would be Japan in terms of anything regarding employment.
Yes, regarding employment, right? So specifically regarding employment. Now there's other stuff that's gone beyond employment that can be Canada. We'll get into that. So they have this, general activity rules, which they say that these rules are designed to prevent infringement of third-party rights, leaks of confidential information belonging to any color or third parties, damage to the reputation or credibility of third parties. Real quick, this is Japanese law here. So this bit here where they talk about damage to the reputation or credibility of third parties. This is something you need to pay a very close attention to whenever you analyze Japanese issues. And this is something a lot of people get wrong. The defamation laws, the copyright laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go
Especially
way further in Japan than the US. There are moral rights to IP that do not exist in the US. There are protections that go further than that allow for pretty severe damages if you do anything without the permission of somebody who you might need to get the permission of. For example, famously, right, if you were doing a walking stream and there was somebody in the walking stream, where you're going down the street with a camera, and somebody objected to that, right, you would have to remedy that pretty quickly or instantly, which is why a lot of times it's just better to blur the faces. Because if somebody was to object to that or have a problem with that, you're in deep trouble in Japan. That's very, very serious. So understand that reputation, credibility, that language is much more powerful than it might be on the US side. Or involves socially condemned behaviors. As a company, we are confident that in order to deliver content for our fans to enjoy in the long term and to create an environment where our affiliated livers can safely perform their activities with the support of fans and stakeholders, it is essential for both our livers and company to unite. That's a very Japanese concept there.
And by livers, they mean they're VTubers. That's kind of their catch-all term for VTuber talent.
Right, which they might as well say employees, right? But the livers mean specifically the VTuber talent employees. So right. They have to unite and adhere to the compliance rules. Very Japanese framing there, guys. Despite our efforts to uphold these rules, Selen repeatedly violated the activity rules since joining Nijisanji, going all the way back to 2021. So they're trying to document the whole thing, right? And they go out here saying that she's documented this for non-compliance with rights confirmation authorization flows, which could potentially lead to the infringement of third-party rights, including copyrights. The violations also include unauthorized usage of works and assets belonging to others affiliated with any color, disregarding the intentions of these parties, as well as lack of communication with creators, resulting in delays of Selen Tatsuki's commission payments to creators. Furthermore, there have been ongoing reports about the inappropriate behavior by Selen Tatsuki throughout her time as a Nijisanji liver. We've been addressing these concerns. And this is just page 1. We'll go to page 2. But even here, guys, what they've said is already pretty defamatory if it's not true. And there's some of this that even with what the facts that I've seen so far appears may not be true, right? So, and once again, guys, I know a lot of what's out there is like speculation, right, Gator?
Right.
Certainly there's a ton of speculation out there. But it seems like if we talk about this line here, which I would be concerned with, infringement on third-party property rights. My understanding, Gator, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that she, in reality, did not violate anybody's copyright or IP laws, that she had permissions for everything that she did.
Right. She even reached out to the original author of the song that she used, Lily Pichu, and got her explicit permission, and was actually working behind the scenes trying to get management to just kind of give the okay and reach out to these people. They didn't do it. So on her own behalf, she went and talked to these people and got the permission to use all of the assets, to use all of the art, to use the song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so she had that permission. There was no actual infringement upon the rights of other livers or anybody in general, right? Third parties, right? So that could be random people, random artists, whatever. And look, I understand like workflow is something that was a debate. I believe there was a debate about how long it took them to get back. And I know some people, and once again, I'm trying to be objective here, and provide a pretty level-headed analysis. Some people were, I think, mad, Gator, that the work that the permissions, the management permissions for posting the video were taking too long. I think it was something like 41 hours that they essentially didn't respond to her, so she just posted it.
Right.
I think it was something like that.
It was something like that.
41, 42. To be honest with you guys, look, I've worked in a corporate environment and I've done a lot of things that should have taken 10 minutes and they took a week. So I don't want to say in terms of an internal workflow of a company that whether that's reasonable or unreasonable. And, we'd have to look at her contract as to what they would stipulate and like how fast they would get back, which probably, once again, people don't have a contract lawyer looking over that when they sign. This is part of the unequal power between an employee and a company. This is something that you would want a lawyer looking at and saying, no, if I post something, you should have to approve this within 24 hours, right? Like you would want that in there. I don't know whether that's in there or not. I want to know, right? Because that'd be very relevant.
And see, that's a lot of stuff that we don't have access to because, we don't have the document that Doki Bird wrote about everything. So, everything is kind of nebulous. Or her contract. So everything's kind of nebulous.
Which I would need to see to assess, right? So I know a lot of people want to come out in condemnation, right? I'm more raising questions and things that I would want to see if I was her attorney or if I was counseling with Selen on this in any way. I would say these are the questions I would ask, right? I would hope she goes back and looks at that contract. I hope she's reviewed that contract. I hope she's also reviewed it with somebody who is a Japanese lawyer, not just a Canadian lawyer, right? Because obviously they will have a different perspective on that and a different ability to bring that action.
Right. Chad's bringing up a good point too, that, she got permission from Lily Pichu back in 2022. It's not like this project was something she came up with spur of the moment and was done really quickly and then just like instantly released. It was something that was a long-term project that she had planned for at least a year and had gone through all of these processes. It was expected to release in December. And, as she got towards the end of the month of December, she's like, okay, when can I put my video up? It's complete. It's uploaded and privated on my channel, ready to go. And, as we kind of go into more detail about other things that have been going on, we see that this is a pattern of behavior. It wasn't like she just, this was the first time that management ghosted her and she kind of had to take things into her own hands. This is a pattern of behavior which will not play in Nijisanji's favor.
And let me point this out here too, guys. Just because, like, if I comment on something like it's not legal, that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it moral. It doesn't make it ethical. And once again, the allegation that Nijisanji is a black company, which for those that don't know, black company is a very specific term in Japan for a company that violates Japanese labor standards, that overworks you, that pushes you, that engages in workplace bullying or harassment, which we were talking about this before the show. I was talking about this with Gator before the show. In Japan, and also I was in Korea as well, it tends to be more common even in regular workplaces where there's a dynamic of power where it's like you do this or else, right? Or you do this or, we will do X, right? It's like you do this or we will terminate your visa, right? So obviously some VTubers are probably in Japan. Maybe they're on a work visa. We'll terminate your work visa, right? We will, punish you. We will destroy your reputation. We will not pay you, right? Whatever the thing is that they're threatening to do, right? They may do that, right? As a company. And the worse you go, it's more of a sliding scale, right? All companies in Japan are pretty hard to work with, but a black company is the worst. And what is becoming more clear is Nijisanji is on definitely pushing towards one side of this equation, even if what they're doing is not necessarily illegal, right? So, for example, the workflow that itself, the approval itself, may not have been a legal breach of contract, but it doesn't make it a good thing, right? That's in fact, it might be a tactic used to control her, like which is fucked up, by the way. And I'm gonna be very clear about that. It's fucked up. It's extremely fucked up, but might not necessarily be illegal. And you know, that's something
into, like the difference between Japanese labor law versus like labor laws in the West. The Japanese businesses have a lot more like they still have laws that they have to go by, but they have a lot more leeway in what they're allowed to do.
And also, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is me keeping it 100 as a guy who's over here in Asia, who's actually, I've gotten a work visa for Japan. I actually didn't go, but I've gotten multiple work visas for Japan. I've gone over there. I was, going to go over there for a while, but I ended up in Korea instead. But I mean, they really don't care as much if you're the gaijin, right? So which is another question, right? You're a non-Japanese working in Japan, right? The labor standards are kind of like that. By the way, it was kind of the same thing in Korea as well. I had a good friend who had a labor case, and it was a nightmare because everything is just, okay, turn to the side, and they hope you leave the country, and the problem goes away.
What's interesting is I believe, and Chad can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that they just recently, somebody had released some content that had a graduated Nijisanji member in it. So it's like, okay, well, if that's the reason, then why did you allow this but not that?
Right. It's a disparate enforcement, right? They're enforcing it selectively against Selen and not against their other livers.
Right.
Which is pretty clear proof there of like if we're going for the hostile workplace claim, right? That's where that anchors in favor of that. All right, so let's continue with this termination notice, because this is kind of the best. So the events leading to the suspension. So she posted the music video. That was the last cup of coffee, right? Materials were shared for the first time on December 24th. Since some elements of the music video lacked prior authorization, on December 25th, we communicated that permission needed to be obtained from the relevant parties, requesting her wait before releasing it. Despite this, she disregarded the notice and proceeded with the unauthorized posting. Our immediate response was to make the video private until the authorizations were cleared. At the same time, the reasoning was clearly explained to Selen. Selen took to social media, specifically X, making misleading statements that the omitted content, notably management, has privated the song. Furthermore, she included statements encouraging third parties to re-upload the music video, which breaches any color's guidelines for secondary creation, right? Because that would obviously, be somebody using what is, I guess any colors claiming they would have the rights to any IP, right? So anything that Selen creates, they would claim the rights to, right?
Right. They would reserve the rights to anything that she makes.
Right. So that they're right over others posting their IP. I mean, essentially, they could just copyright strike them, essentially. Right. These actions led to various misunderstandings that damaged the reputation of Anycolor and Nijisan EN. In an effort to calm the situation, we sought to either publicly disclose the reasons for making it private or have Selen disclose them herself, while being mindful of her physical and mental health. So this is before she's really commented on that. So they're just even saying something like that is an implication that there might be an issue there. And that's a dangerous implication to put in any document. I think.
Right. And this also runs afoul of Canadian law here, because the Canadian law that governs protected health information and personal information is PIPEDA. Some people in chat may be familiar with the U.S. law HIPAA, but that specifically covers protected health information in terms of the healthcare industry. I come from the medical side of things. That's my day job. So I know very intimately how important HIPAA is, and that you should follow it at all times, no matter what, because that's your career on the line. With PIPEDA, it's even more stringent in Canada, because it's not just protected health information. It's also like your address, loans that you have, that's protected information. Anything about you personally, so like your age, mental status, disabilities, even simple things like trying to think of a good example here that wouldn't normally be covered. Oh yeah, so like your employment history.
Really?
That's another thing they can't. Yeah, they can't disclose stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anything that could personally identify you cannot be disclosed without your authorization.
And what I was mentioning to Gator earlier is that many people make wild mistakes about HIPAA in the US. And this is something I actually made in my beginning of my channel when I was just making kind of neutral videos, like helpful law videos. HIPAA doesn't cover a lot of what people think it covers, right? HIPAA covers healthcare and healthcare related industries. But if I give my health information to my friend or even to my employer in the US, that's not covered by HIPAA. I know a lot of people get confused by that, right? But if I turn around in the US and I give my private health information to my, let's say, an employer ends up disclosing that, right? That's not covered in the same way as if it was given to a healthcare and professional, right?
Right. HIPAA wouldn't apply. It would go towards more like general business law.
Yes, exactly. And then it might be something like defamation. It might be something like breach of contract. It might be something like, whatever other damage there is there. And there are other claims for that, right? There might be some sort of damage of your brand, whatever it is, right? Depending on what information was passed along and what the damage is, right? So for example, if you had a disease and that was kind of outed out there, there could be huge ramifications for that civilly in the US. So that's a big one. And this actually came up a lot during COVID. Somebody brought this up. Thank you. During COVID, because during COVID, people were sharing wildly your vaccination status and people were going crazy because they just figured out that HIPAA does not cover employers. So that's why employers were just passing around your vaccination status like it was cotton candy, right?
Right. Because they don't get penalized under HIPAA.
And that's a big deal, guys. You got to understand. I know that we have our common conception of these things and we kind of romanticize these laws, but that's not exactly how they work, right? But obviously Canada is more stringent. So when I think about claims and I think about Canada, that specifically bringing the information privacy, that could be brought in Canada. And I think that's some of the strongest claims, the ones that can be brought in Canada rather than in Japan, because that is a Canada specific thing. So the appropriate venue for that would be Canada because she's a Canadian citizen, right?
She's a Canadian citizen and her information is in Canada.
It's in Canada, right? That makes this a claim. So you can bring both claims. You can bring in Canada a privacy claim, and in Japan, you could do the employment and employment breach of contract, right? Which once again, it's going to be an uphill battle in Japan just because you're fighting against a Japanese company, right, with huge resources. But in Canada, you might have a way better time and a way easier time sealing the deal regarding that information in Canada against Nijisanji. So just so you know, by the way, once again, this is the law, not morality. Is it right to share people's private information? No, not at all. I think morally it's bankrupt, right? But we're talking about the law here. So management did the best to communicate with Selen herself and also her emergency contact, which was this emergency contact her lawyer, I think, or I forget who her emergency contact was. But I believe
when they say emergency contact, they're referring to her mother.
Her mother, okay. Despite her frequent communication, her emergency contact, while remaining considerate of it, we were unable to come to an agreement on how to proceed. Well, you shouldn't be negotiating with her other while she's, that just doesn't seem right to be negotiating with her emergency contact there.
And we kind of get a little bit more of kind of a peek into that from some of the statements she makes as Doki Bird.
Yes.
Because while they were also contacting, her family and talking with them, they were also talking to her lawyer.
Yes. And we'll get into that in 1 second. I just want to finish this page. So the last part of this I want to get into is this termination. And this is one of the biggest things that caused the real outrage, which I think is merited here. After attempting to address the aforementioned situation and communicating with the legal counsel representing Selen, we conveyed the necessity for Selen to inform the public about the reasons behind our decision to make the music video private. Additionally, we expressed to Selen our expectation for future compliance with the activity rules. Despite our efforts, Selen demanded that any colors should be held legally responsible. she claimed she was no longer able to engage in her activities as a liver due to decisions made by any color. Then here's the line: was being harassed by other affiliated livers due to mismanagement, while refusing to acknowledge her responsibility for violating the activity rules. So this one here, I think, is particularly troublesome because it brings in the other livers, right?
Right.
So the other livers are now brought in here because the harassment is keyed to the other livers. So if this is untrue, right, this is a extreme damage to those other livers. In fact, I would say those other livers in some cases might even have claims against Nijisanji themselves, just because they've been pointed to as the problem here, right? When really the issue seems to have been from management, right? This is, self-reported. Yes.
Right. They really had no, they didn't have to put that in there, but they did.
Yeah, they just threw that out there. You're literally snitching on yourself, which usually shows guilt, right? That's usually a sign of guilt.